to limit harm to nesting birds. Why have we gone this route? Well, the city cannot supersede Oregon Department of Agriculture's regulations, who enforce state and federal regulations regarding pesticide use. But the city can model actions we would like to see taken by the public. And we can also use this to promote awareness of the city's stance on avicides. So we are here today to request the city require other bureaus to adopt Portland Parks and Recreation's IPM policy on avian management.
Thank you very much. It was very succinct. If there are no questions from my colleagues, we'll invite up our panel. Thank you very much. Bob Salinger, Conservation Director for the Audubon Society of Portland. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that both Bob and Audubon have been indispensable partners in developing this policy. Stephanie Boyles-Griffin, Senior Director and Wildlife Biologist with the Humane Society of the United States. And Stephanie, welcome to Portland. It's a nice convergence of your being here and a chance for you to testify. We thank you for taking the time. And Lisa Frisch with the Portland Business Alliance. With that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Good morning, my name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Conservation Director for Portland Audubon Society. Now just Tara from Center for Biological Diversity is also here today and would like to testify as well. So thank you very much for this resolution. We are here today to express our strong support and appreciation for the work that has been done on this, particularly to Commissioner Fish and his staff, Jamie Duffy, and to city staff, James Allison, Dave Helzer, Paul Ketchum, Caitlin Lovell, Nicole Lyman. A lot of work has gone into this, and we really appreciate the work that has been done. These types of avicides are dangerous, they're indiscriminate, they're cruel, and they're inhumane, and they have no place on our landscape whatsoever, and particularly on an urban landscape. Dave's told you a little bit about Avitrol, but I want to tell you a little bit more. It is an avicide, a bird pesticide. It is a neurotoxin. It is put in bait. Bait birds are lured in and they eat it. It is advertised as humane. It is anything but humane. It is designed to trigger an alarm response in birds. Birds seizure, they convulse, they scream, they lie on the ground on their sides and their back, their legs pedaling in the air, and then for the most part, they eventually die. That can go on for minutes, it can go on for hours. The pesticide takes sometimes a long time to kick in, so birds can disperse over wide areas before they actually are impacted and then literally fall out of the sky and die on the ground. It's marketed as non-lethal, but in fact, if you read the EPA registration and label, it says explicitly, quote, birds that react in alarm usually die. It is inhumane and it is lethal. Applicators are required to keep the poison area free of people and pets until all poisoned birds are collected. However, this is totally unrealistic. It's a joke. It can take an extended period of time to kick in, and a flock of birds or an individual bird that has consumed this poison can travel miles before it actually feels the impacts. This means that birds can get scattered over miles and miles of our city after they've been poisoned, in our neighborhoods, in our parks, in our community. And the risk to people and pets and other wildlife is particularly high because if you think about the mechanism of death, these birds are lying on the ground, falling out of the sky, lying on the ground, screaming, pedaling, flapping their wings involuntarily. That's the kind of response that draws attention. So if you're a red-tailed hawk or a peregrine falcon or a dog or a cat or a child, that's the kind of thing that might cause you to come pick up these birds. And by the way, this item, this compound is both orally and dermally toxic. So it's toxic to ingestion, it's toxic to the touch. This is really scary stuff, and yet it is sold and legally used. So I want to tell you a little bit about the two events that we had, because I think it's important to get it on the record. The first one was November 24th, 2014, the day before Thanksgiving. Dead crows started showing up at Chapman and Lonsdale squares. A little while later, they were discovered in Waterfront Park, a 25-plus block area covered in dead crows. We started getting calls, the city started getting calls, the city responded, the state responded, the feds responded, Audubon responded. We were all down there the day before Thanksgiving collecting dead crows and trying to figure out what went on. The fire department responded and took air samples because there was a concern that this was a terrorist attack, that somebody had put something into our environment and this was actually terrorism.
It is terrorism.
It is terrorism, but different kind than what people were thinking at that moment, but it was scary enough. We set up an emergency hotline, we called in extra volunteers, and we called in extra staff, and for the next several days throughout the holiday weekend, we collected dead crows and responded to every single report of sick and injured birds. Actually went out into the field and did that. Our Wildlife Care Center did that, collected them, and then got them off to the labs for shipping, for testing, and it was in fact confirmed that this was Avitrol. But we didn't know what it was at the time. That's one of the really scary things, is you don't know until several days, sometimes weeks later after they get done with the testing. The second event was in late January of 2018. People in northeast Portland, near MLK and northeast Jessup, witnessed a flock of crows flying overhead, and suddenly birds literally started dropping from the sky, crashing into the ground. Some were dead when they hit the ground. Others screamed and twitched and seizured and convulsed and then died. A reporter that covered it said it was one of the worst things that she'd ever seen. Again, a massive mobilization, city, state, feds, Audubon. We again set up a hotline. We again went out for days, actually weeks afterwards, looking at sick and dying birds to see if this was a continuation of the pattern. We are still getting calls today from that announcement of if you see sick and dying birds, call us. People are still calling saying, I saw a sick crow yesterday. I'm worried because I think it might have been poison. There might be poison in my neighborhood. Now, this is obviously not something that's associated with that incident, but it shows how it gets into the psyche of our community. We put up a $1,000 reward on each one of these, but we didn't identify anybody who had actually done it, unfortunately. These incidents have occurred in other cities as well. There was a big incident in Bend several years back in which they poisoned over a senior center and birds lay dying on the rooftop of the ground. They measured the temperature of that ground where those birds were lying and convulsing. It was over 140 degrees. Anybody that tells you this is a humane way to die hasn't really looked at this product. You can imagine a wild animal lying out in the open on 140 degree ground, twitching and convulsing. I want to call out our Wildlife Care Center because this is the kind of stuff that our Wildlife Care Center responds to. We have a Wildlife Care Center volunteer here today, Carrie May, front row. We have over 100 volunteers and several staff. We deal with 3,000 injured animals a year and 10,000 wildlife phone calls. These are among the scariest types of situations we see. People ask me, is it scary to work with wild animals, eagles and bears? No, it's scary to work with poisoned animals because you can't identify them as they come in the door. They don't come in with a tag saying, do not handle me because I have a dermal poison on my body. That's what really worries me with our staff and volunteers, is this kind of a risk that we have to respond to. And it's not a theoretical risk, it's a real risk. I and another staff person were poisoned in the 1990s handling birds that were poisoned with a different compound called Ridibird that was a dermal poison, a contact poison. Red tail came in, was identified as hit by car. In fact, it was covered in this compound, and we both wound up showing symptoms of that poison. It is a real risk to the community, and it's a real risk to the people that respond. I think we call it our care center today because we're going to go through a big expansion process next year. And this is the kind of thing that we're set up to do. We provide a really big service to this community, and we'd love to have council support in the importance of this facility as we go forward with that expansion process. Your endorsement will be helpful in that, so we continue to respond to these kinds of events. So I want to end today by simply noting that this is a very important step that you're taking. I want to note that the city does not poison birds, and we appreciate that. And although this applies on city property, and the city isn't using these poisons, this will prevent anybody from even considering it in the future on city property. But more importantly, it sends a message to our community that these poisons are unacceptable, they're dangerous, and they don't have any place here. It sends a message to the state that they need to do a better job regulating these incidences and following up on them, and also perhaps giving local authority so that we can regulate them better in our own communities. And finally, it sends a message to the EPA, which is responsible for licensing and re-registering these pesticides periodically. We hear constantly that we don't have any data about these pesticides from the EPA. We don't know that they're causing problems. Well, it's very, very hard to actually identify non-target incidences like the ones we see and the problems that they create because they don't get well documented. So what you're doing today is documenting what occurred. You're putting the city on record, as other cities have as well. And when this does come up for re-registration, hopefully what we'll see is EPA making the right decision the next time and getting these products, this product in particular, but these kinds of products off the market permanently and forever. So thank you very much for all your work on this. We really appreciate it.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Boyles-Griffin, and I serve as the Senior Scientist in the Wildlife Protection Department at the Humane Society of the United States in Washington, D.C. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I also serve as a Science and Policy Director at the Oxford Institute for Wildlife Fertility Control. That institute serves as sort of the world's premier clearinghouse on anything and everything having to do with that field of wildlife management. In 2011, I was appointed by Governor Martin O'Malley to serve as a commissioner on the Maryland Wildlife Advisory Commission. Just wanted to kind of give you all a little bit of background about myself. I've been working in the field of human-wildlife conflict resolution for about 20 years. During that time, I've worked with federal, state, government agencies, municipalities, and corporations to implement humane, sustainable programs. For instance, I did my master's thesis working with the Virginia Department of Transportation to resolve conflicts with beavers in a humane and sustainable way where they dam road culverts and cause roads to wash out. And we're currently working with a team of my associates and colleagues at HSUS with Bureau of Land Management to find ways to manage wild burros at a herd management area in northwestern Arizona using fertility control vaccines. So, but on behalf of the HSUS and our Portland, Oregon members and constituents, we really appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony this morning and to express our strong support for the proposed resolution to adopt the Portland Parks and Recreation's integrated pest management policy that prohibits the use of Avitrol and other avicides on city-owned property and on infrastructure. As Bob has already said and was presented by the Parks Department, Avitrol is a restricted use toxic chemical used to kill pigeons and other birds. That's what it's registered for. It's promoted as a flock frightening agent or a repellent, but it is in fact a nervous system poison that can indiscriminately kill any bird or any mammal that consumes it, including livestock and even companion animals. Birds who consume it suffer convulsions and often die very slow, painful deaths. It is not only really traumatic for the birds to die this way, as Bob stated, but it's also really traumatic for people, especially children, who witness or try to help dying birds when they're found in public spaces. These kind of grisly events have been reported by our constituents, and it's been covered in the news media over many years. This avicide has been in use. Me personally, when I first entered this realm of work that I do now, one of the first things I got called off on is birds falling out of the sky and gathering them up and trying to figure out what was wrong with them, seeing the bait around. I'd never seen Avitrol before. I thought it was just corn. It had a little bit of green matter on it. I had no idea it was a toxicant, and it is a dermal toxicant, and I was probably picking it up with my bare hands, just trying to keep another bird from consuming it. Was putting myself at risk doing so. I know better now, but what if it had been a kid, you know? And not me. So, users claim that these distressed behavior of poison birds actually frightens them away and their flock members away. But any frightening effect of Avitrol on surviving birds is very short-lived, and because birds remaining in the area return quickly and reproduce, and that's basically why killing birds by any means, not just Avitrol, it's not only cruel, it fails to address the root cause of whatever the problem may be, leading to an endless killing, an unnecessary killing cycle. So from the HSUS's perspective, when impacts are being experienced from birds aggregating in areas due to attractants or an area that's accessible for nesting and loafing, we encourage cities to implement a humane integrated approach to mitigate these impacts and manage bird populations. For example, many of the conflicts with birds can be tied to feeding, so we support efforts by cities to curb the intentional or unintentional feeding of birds by educating the public and proactively removing food attractants. We also recommend using a wide variety of devices available to permanently prevent birds from roosting and nesting in areas where they're not wanted. Our decades of work on conflict resolution with communities across the U.S. demonstrates to us that these kinds of integrated and comprehensive approaches to managing issues with birds and other wildlife are the most successful in providing long-term resolution and preventing unnecessary killing of both target and non-target animals. And finally, we support the use of fertility control methods, like the product ovocontrol, to stabilize and reduce the size of flocks over time when it's necessary and appropriate to do so. Ovocontrol is a bird contraception that comes in the form of kibble-type food, which causes birds to eat it regularly to lay eggs that would fail to develop. So it's humane, it's sustainable, doesn't always have to be used, but in situations where it might be beneficial to slowly reduce flock size over time, it's something that's an option for cities. And for these reasons, all of the above, we strongly support the proposed resolution and applaud the City of Portland for its leadership in establishing